Sunday, as we celebrated Palm Sunday and remembered Jesus entering Jerusalem as King, I spoke about days that shook the world. There are days when it feels like the world is changing all around us, where everything is being shaken. On a global scale, 9/11 is a recent example. Or if you're Ukrainian, the 24th of February 2022 might be an example for you, the day Russia invaded and the war began. We have these days that shake the world on a personal level as well. The day you got the job, or the day you didn't. The day you got the results of the medical tests. The day the baby was born. The day the accident happened. And many more. Days that shook the world, or days that shook our world. Christians believe that there is no greater day that shook the world than the events we remember and celebrate this morning. Easter Day, the day Jesus rose from the dead, is the day. The day the world changed. The day everything was different. The day after which nothing was the same anymore. But it's true to say that almost everyone alive at the time of the first Easter missed it. They didn't notice. It wasn't obvious to them that the world changed that day. And yet, it did. The first people to find out were a small group of women, and then a wider group of men in Jerusalem. Let's look at the reading we just heard from John's Gospel. Mary Magdalene and some of the other women go to the tomb. We know it wasn't just Mary Magdalene. She wasn't on her own, because the other Gospels tell us there were other people there as well. And because Mary, in our reading in John, says, "They've put the Lord in the tomb, and we don't know where they've put him." We. So Mary and the women go to the tomb, but they find the stone has been rolled away from the entrance. Mary runs to tell Peter and the disciple whom Jesus loved, who we think is John, the author of the Gospel. Peter, John, and Mary run back to the tomb. And there are so many small details here that it's likely that the author of these verses really was present that day. We are told that John is a faster runner than Peter is. John gets to the tomb, looks in, but doesn't go in. Peter catches him up, pushes him out the way, and goes inside. Followed then by John. Now, Jesus' body has been wrapped in cloths, burial cloths, as was normal back then. A cloth for the body and a separate cloth for the head. John tells us they saw the linen wrappings lying there and the cloth that had been on Jesus' head, not lying with the linen wrappings, but rolled up in a place by itself. What John is trying to tell us, I think, is that the wrappings are still where they had been, but the body is gone. Let me show you what I mean. What they should have found is this: a body with wrappings around it, in this case, clothes. If grave robbers had stolen the body, what they would have found is this: nothing. If teenagers had been involved, they would have found this: just a pile of clothes. But what they actually found was this: everything was still where it should be, but the body was gone. As if Jesus had simply passed through the wrappings. He was raised to life through the grave clothes. But they didn't know that at the time, so no wonder they were confused. What on earth is going on, they think. The body is gone, but the grave clothes are still there. Peter and John leave, but Mary stays behind. John tells us that Mary was weeping, but I don't think she was just gently sobbing to herself. I think she was probably proper wailing. Back then, and today in many parts of the world, people don't hold back. They let their grief out. They let it rip through them. Mary is outside the tomb, giving it everything she's got. Not only has her friend and teacher died in the most horrible way, but now someone has taken his body. She is devastated. I wonder if you can identify with Mary. Have you ever had a moment like that? A moment when everything is just too much, and all you can do is cry or wail, or just maybe sit in stunned silence. Often those moments for us are caused in the same way that they were for Mary: the death of a loved one. Mary is wailing outside the tomb. No wonder she doesn't recognize Jesus when he comes up behind her. "Woman, why are you weeping? For whom are you looking?" "Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have laid him, and I will take him away." In her grief and distress, Mary can't see that it's Jesus. But she realizes it the moment he speaks her name: Mary. That's when she knows. That's the moment when Mary's world is turned upside down. That's the moment when she realizes Jesus is back. That's the moment when everything changes. Every single one of us needs that moment in our lives when we hear Jesus calling us by name. Jesus showing us that he is real and alive, calling us to follow him. That moment when Jesus tells us that yes, he has died for the world, but not just for the world, not just for everyone, but for you. He did it for you. Yes, you. Have you heard Jesus call you by name? Because he's calling you today. Whatever your name is, The risen Jesus calls you this Easter morning, as he called Mary by name. I died for you. I love you. I'm alive today. Come to me. Listen to my call. Follow me. Will you respond to Jesus' call? Mary turns and grabs hold of Jesus, and she calls him Rabbi, teacher. It literally means, my great one. Jesus, you are my great one, says Mary as she holds onto him. He is our great one too. The one who has gone through death and out the other side. The one who lives and loves and saves. Jesus is calling us, you, by name today. The risen Christ wants your attention. Will you follow him? That day, Jesus gave Mary a job to do. Go to my brothers and tell them what you have seen. Tell them I'm alive. And so Mary became the first person in the whole wide world to find out that the world shook that day, that nothing was the same anymore. And that message went from Mary to the disciples, and from them to a wider group of Jesus' followers. And they took the message to the nations. And here we are today. In the next few days and months and years, those early Christians began to understand what had actually happened on Easter Day. Peter, remember, was at the empty tomb. Later on Easter Day, he met Jesus face to face again. 6 years or so later, Peter explained it like this. They put Jesus to death by hanging him on a tree. But God raised him on the third day and allowed him to appear, not to all the people, but to us who were chosen by God as witnesses, and who ate and drank with him after he rose from the dead. Note that Jesus wasn't a ghost or a spirit. He was real and solid. A person who could still eat and drink. That's what resurrection means. Bodily life after bodily death. A life as solid and real, even more real than this one. Peter goes on, Jesus commanded us to preach to the people and to testify that he is the one ordained by God as judge of the living and the dead. All the prophets testify about him, that everyone who believes in him receives forgiveness of sins through his name. On that first Easter day, all they really knew was that Jesus was alive again. But quickly they realized that he truly is the great one, the judge of all the world, the King. And he's also the one who calls us by name. So today, will you listen to the voice of the risen Jesus as we celebrate his rising from the dead Will you listen to him? Will you give him your heart? Will you follow him to the ends of the earth if he asks you to? He died for you. He rose again for you. He is the great one. And as we celebrate today, he wants your attention.